All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I wanted to get back into telling more stories of things that had happened in my life because that's how a lot of this had started was, telling stories about things that were going on, you know, growing up and, whether it be um, my home life when I was a kid or, doing time or, you know, coming home and living on the streets and shit like that. But this story, like I've been waiting to talk about it for a while. I just, I think I did it at one time, but I never edited the video, and I don't think I ever put. I know I didn't put it out, but I think I might have did a video on it, but I just never posted it, or I never edited it, or it got lost somehow. Anyways, this has to do with when I was younger. When I was this happened when I was like 12, and you know, I tell these stories because this is what happened in my life. Not to upset nobody, not to upset my family members, not to offend my family members, but these are things that that happened in my life. So I talk about it. And this particular story has to do with my mother and my father. Now I already told you guys stories about how I grew up and how things are with me and how things were with me and my father when I was younger. Since then, I mean, me and my father have gotten past that shit years ago. You know, it's been, I couldn't even tell you, it's been a very long time that we had got past all that stuff that happened in the past. Um, but recently, me and him had talked and I finally got the answers that I was looking for that I had been wondering for so many years. But we talked about it and I felt comfortable. Like I know if I'm going to die from what I'm going through, I can go with knowing that I had the answers. I didn't leave here wondering for, you know, I never got I never got the answers. I got the answers. I got everything that I needed. So there's no there's no ill feelings with me toward my father. There should have never been none toward with my father toward me because I had never done nothing. But as far as like me toward him, no. And I think I said before in another video, um, where I have said like, oh, my father is like, one of my best friends now. And honestly, I shouldn't say that because he's not my friend. I honestly, I feel because I feel the same way about my sons. I'm not their friend. I'll never be their friend. I don't want to be their friend. Um, I'm their father, and that's it. That's all there is to it. I'm not their friend. I never wanted to be their friend. And same thing with my daughters. I'm not their friend. I don't want to be their friend. I'm their father. That's it. And it's just a respect thing. I feel like if I say my father's my best friend or he's one of my best friends, I'm taking from him. I'm disrespecting him because he's not my friend. He's my father. That's the way that I feel. So when people are say, "Oh, my kids are," I'm their best friend. Well, that's you can say whatever you want, but to me, it's you're not their friend. Be their parent. Stop trying to be your kid's friend. It's to me, it's disrespectful. But that's just my opinion. If you don't like it, so what? But anyways, so this is a story though, and I know that my father doesn't. I don't think he knows this. I don't see how he would know. This is probably the first time you ever heard this stuff. But I was 12 years old at the time, and I was at my grandmother's house in Inglewood, and I was hanging out in the backyard. I was there back there by myself, and some guy had came. There was like an alleyway. The grandma lived on Inglewood Avenue, 93rd. Behind Inglewood Avenue, the houses there was an alley that ran there. That was next to my grandmother's house. My grandmother's house was in 93rd. So there's an alley ran right next to my grandmother's house. There was also an alley that ran behind my grandmother's house. So this guy comes walking up the alley from the front of the house, and he was an older guy. He had like, balding in the middle. He had like one of them cul-de-sac, hairdos. Bald in the front right here and shit. The hair goes around. He had like a cul-de-sac. And he's kind of short in stature. That I remember he was kind of short guy. And he comes up to me and he's like, Michael. And I seen he had can't remember if it was I know it was on the top, but I can't remember if it was exactly one of his two front teeth or one of the ones on the side, but he had a silver tooth. And he comes walking up and he says, Michael, you're Michael? And I said, yeah. And he says, hey, how you doing? And he's like, my name's Gilbert. Hey, I'm a friend of your family. And he comes and he shakes my hand. And I don't know who this guy is, I'm just, like, but, we grew up being respectful, So he's like, my name's Gilbert. He shakes my hand. He goes, and I said, oh, nice to meet you. He said, I'm a friend of the family. And he's just staring at me. And he's like, wow, I haven't seen you in a long time. And I don't remember him. So I'm looking at him like trying to figure out who he is. He's like, I ain't seen you in a long time. He goes, I've been away for a while. Again, I'm 12 years old. I don't know who this guy is. And he's like, I haven't seen you in a very long time. You grew up. And but I don't know what to say. I'm like, oh, okay. And he said, well, I'll be seeing you around. And he's like, but just keep this between me and you. That we talked. He goes, I'll be seeing you around. And I says, okay. Like, it wasn't like he was being creepy or nothing, and he shook my hand. He's like, okay, take care. I'll be seeing you. And he leaves, but I'm sitting there like, who's this guy? Because I don't remember him. I don't know who he is. But again, I don't tell nobody like, hey, who's this guy? I don't ask nobody. It was just a real quick interaction. He left. So fast forward a couple, it was in October. It was in October of, I had just turned 13. So it was a couple months later when the next event happened was, let me see, 88. I want to say it was October 1988. When I was at my grandmother's house that one day, we were living in Long Beach, but I was at my grandmother's house visiting over there for the weekend. So then you fast forward to October 1988, we're still living in Long Beach. We lived in Long Beach for like a year off of Willow and Fashion. That's when I was going to Stevens Junior High School. We lived in a little house on Fashion Avenue off of Willow. My cousin Cindy and her husband owned the house and they rented it out to us. And so we were living there. And so it was around the time of my birthday for me to turn 13. And my mom tells me, things were going really fucked up at home with my mother and father. They were really getting worse. The arguing and the abuse and all that shit was getting worse between the between them. Was getting worse. With me hearing him, it was getting worse, And so one day my mom tells me, "Come on, let's go with me to the store." And my mom tells my dad, "I'm gonna take Mike with me. We're gonna go to the market." So he's like, "Okay." So we had one of them little station wagon Volvos, a green one, and me and her leave to go to the market. We're to go grocery shopping. Tell my dad we're to go grocery shopping. My sister and my brother stayed with my dad. She made sure they stayed with him. So then me and her leave, and I'm thinking we're going to the market. And she says, "Can I trust you? Can I tell you something? Can I trust you without you saying anything?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And she's like, "You want to get out of here? You want to leave, don't you?" And I was telling her, like, "Leave? Like, what do you mean?" She's like, "You want to leave your dad? You want us to leave your dad, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And so she's like, "Well, I'm gonna take you somewhere right now, but you can't say nothing. Promise that you won't say nothing." And I said, "I won't say nothing. I won't say nothing." She said, "Okay." So we're driving, and we end up at a park. I don't remember where the park was. It wouldn't be far from my house. I know that my mom wouldn't travel too far from the house, because my dad would figure something's wrong if we're gone too long. We couldn't go all the way. We could, like I said, we were in Long Beach. We couldn't drive all the way to, you know, um, Lawndale or Inglewood or Hawthorne because it's too far to drive. And by the time we get back, go to the market, do all that shit, we gone for a couple hours. And my dad's like, "What the fuck's going on?" So it had to be somewhere right there in Long Beach, and I think it was somewhere kind of close to the house. But we ended up at a park, like a small park. And when we pull into the park, we pull next to a little white Toyota Corolla. And she's like, "Come on, get out." And I get out, and then a guy gets out of that little white Toyota Corolla. And when he gets out, I recognize him right away. He was the same guy that was in the alley at my grandmother's house in Inglewood. So I'm looking at him, and I'm looking at my mom, wondering like, what the hell's going on? And she says, "You met him at grandma's house?" I said, "Yeah." And he comes up to me again. He shakes my hand. He's like, "Hey, it's good to see you again." And I was like, "Okay, I don't know what's going on." And she's like, "You want to get out, don't you?" And I was like, "Yeah." Then she says, "Well, he's gonna help us get out. His name's Gilbert." And I said, "Yeah, he told me." He's like, "He's gonna help us leave." And I was like kind of confused at first. And kept saying, "He's my friend. I've known him for a long time." Bef- I think that I can't remember. I want to say that because my dad was busted after I was born. Once I was a year old, less than a year old, my dad got busted. He went to prison. So during this time, this guy came around. So we're talking about 1974, and that's the stories that I would hear is that he used to take my mom to take me to doctor's appointments and shit like that. I was already born. This wasn't before I was born. I was already born. My father was in prison. I think that maybe they thought my father was going to go to prison for the rest of his life. That he was going to go to prison for life. That was it. That didn't end up happening. Um, my dad ended up beating his case and he got out of prison. I think my dad was gone for like a year. But during that time, I think this is during the time where my mom was seeing this other guy, Gilbert. So, anyways, he says, "Hey, um, your birthday's coming up, right? It's gonna be your birthday, or your birthday just passed." It was during that time, either just before my birthday or after my birthday. And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, um, I missed a lot of your birthdays, so I have something for you." And I said, "Okay." He's like, "Come on, come over to the trunk of the car." So he opens the trunk of the car, and he pulls out a box, and it's a Nintendo, a regular Nintendo. Okay, Nintendo had just barely came out within a couple years of that time, and I didn't have one. Me and my brother didn't have one because my dad wouldn't buy us one. We always had to go play with the neighbors. People up front when we lived in Lawndale, before we moved to Long Beach, the people up front they had one, and so we'd go in their house and we'd play. But it was always like an argument. bunch of kids in there. We all wanted to play. It always turned into an argument of fighting over the controllers and shit, you know. So, but my father would never buy us one. Not just because they were too expensive. It's just my that was my dad's thing. My dad was kind of tight like that. You know, I've told stories about that. How my dad was. You know, he was tight like that. Uh, he just wouldn't buy expensive shit like that for us. He'd always say we're gonna break it, and he's wasting his money and shit. You know, so yeah, I've told funny stories about him. Like that's just the way that my dad was. You know. So here he comes with this fucking Nintendo, and it was the Nintendo. It had the game, the two controllers. It had was the Super Mario Brothers, the Duck Hunt, and it had the gun for Duck Hunt. It was the whole complete package, right? And he's like, "Here, this is for you." And I remember just because I wanted one so bad, you know what I mean? I don't think that he did that because he's trying to convince me or anything. But I think that he did it just because he he honestly felt that way. Like he said, you know, I missed a lot of your birthdays, and it made me wonder like why he said that. And so you know, he gave me the Nintendo, and I was holding it, and I was just like, I was happy as fuck. I was happy as fuck. You know what I mean? That here I have this fucking Nintendo, you know. But at the same time, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, how am I gonna tell my dad about this shit? What am I gonna hide it? I can't hide it. What, you know? So I'm like, I'm happy, but at the same time, I'm fucking terrified now. You know, I'm terrified. What's gonna happen? And so he's like, this is for you. Happy birthday. But you have to share it with your brother. But it's yours, but make sure that you share it with your brother. So I was like, okay, I will. And he goes, okay. Are you okay with everything that your mom's telling you? And I was like, yeah, because at that time, that's the way that I felt. Like I didn't want to be there no more. I was going through too much shit at the time. You know what I mean? So I didn't give a fuck. I didn't want to be there no more. He didn't have to give me a fucking Nintendo to convince me that I didn't want to be there no more. You know, that it had nothing to do with that. You know what I mean? But giving me the fucking Nintendo, you know, that really convinced me, you know what I mean? Like, hell yeah. But again, like I was terrified inside. I was terrified. You know, I didn't show that, but that's what the thoughts were. So then they're like, okay, well, he's like, you guys can't stay here too long. You guys gotta go. So we take the thing, put in the back of the Volvo, and we leave. And we go to the market, we do the shopping and all that stuff. We come back home. Well, on the way when we leave, I said, Mom, what are we gonna do with that? How can I hide that? And she's like, you don't have to hide it. She goes, don't worry. I already got a story. I'll tell your dad that I've been saving money out of my checks because my mother was on welfare. Even though my father worked, they weren't married. We were fucking the system. Well, they were fucking the system. I ain't got nothing to do with what they were doing, but my mom and them they was fucking the system. My mom was getting welfare. My dad lived in the house. You know what I mean? We were getting food stamps and all that bullshit. But my dad, you know, he was a hard worker. My dad was never no bum. My dad worked sometimes 7 days a week. You know what I mean? My dad wasn't no paisa, but he worked like one. You know what I mean? So my dad always worked. Even though he was doing other shit, sound dope and stuff like that. I think I was just out of greed because my mother was getting welfare. My father had a job. He had his own business. And, you know, then he was doing shit on the side. You know what I mean? So, you know, it was just more money for the house. You know what I mean? But anyways, and plus the fucking food stamps. So she's like, I'm gonna tell your dad that I've been saving $10 here, $20 here, and that your grandma gave me the rest, which is my mother's mom. Because my grandmother, I was very close with her. She was like my mother also. And she would do anything for me. So she's like, I'll tell your dad that I saved half of it and your grandma gave me. And we're talking about 1988. I think the Nintendo was only like $125. That's nothing now, 2024. It's nothing. I'll spend more than that at a fucking restaurant. Um, but back then it was a lot of money. So she said, don't worry. Just keep the story straight, don't worry. I said, okay. But I'm telling you, but growing up the way that I grew up, around my father and shit like that, I knew how already at the time to be manipulative and how to put on the smiling face. Even though I was fucking terrified inside, I didn't show it. I knew not to show it because I knew my father was like, to me, my father was like a how they say like a dog that can smell you, you're afraid of it, or horses, they know you're afraid. My father was like that. To me, like this fucking guy could smell it. He knew you were terrified, but I knew how to cover that up. So we get home, and first thing I do is grab that Nintendo, and my mom grabs the groceries, and we come into the house, and right away my dad sees it, and he's looking. He says, "Hey, where the hell did you guys get that?" Or "Where the hell did you get that?" And my mom says, "I've been saving money out of my checks, little by little. I saved up half of it. My mom saved up gave the rest to me, for his birthday. I think he had said it was for my birthday. Little by little, we saved up the money to buy it." And I remember the look on his face was like he was looking at both of us, like just to see if he can catch something. I'm telling you, he was fucking good. He was looking at us like especially my mom, like he was looking and he's like, "Oh, well, I don't you on that fucking thing all day long, all the time. You can play, but don't be, when I come home, you don't be on that fucking thing. You don't be on it all day. You sure that you ain't sit in the house all day playing that fucking game on the weekend and stuff. So you don't even think about it." And when he said that, it was like the weight was lifted off me. He fucking bought it. He doesn't know. So I'm like, cool. And so I told him, I said, "But can I hook it up right now?" And he's like, "Yeah, go ahead. You guys can play for a little while." So I'm like, cool. So boom, right away, I was like, no more worries. You know what I mean? When me and my brother was so excited. We were out there, we were playing Super Mario. Like we had a Nintendo, you know what I mean? And I remember one time, it was, I don't know, a month or so after that. I don't know, we got in trouble. Me and my brother got in trouble or some shit. And we were playing the fucking Nintendo. And my dad had said, because my dad would sometimes play it. After that we bought a game. It was called Russian Attack, which was a really cool game back then when Nintendo first came out. And he liked it. He liked that game. My dad did, because it was a shooting game. You're killing like Russians and their security dogs and all kinds of shit. So he liked it. So sometimes we'd be out there playing, and all of a sudden he'd come in the front room, was like, "Hey, give me the controller," and he'd start playing. He didn't know the fuck he was doing, but so he would sit there and try to play it. Those are the good times. But one day we got in trouble, and I remember he said, "I'll take that fucking Nintendo away from you guys. I paid for the fucking thing. We bought it for you. I'll take it from you." And inside I was laughing. Inside I was laughing because I knew, like, no, you didn't. Another man bought that for me. You didn't buy that for me. It made me feel good because I never had nothing over him. Never. I could never get over on the guy. It was very hard to get over on him. You think he could fucking smell you lying. He knew you were lying. The look on your face, he'd know straight off the bat that you were lying. He would catch me constantly lying. But having that was like my ammunition. Like when he said that, I remember him telling me that, me and my brother, and inside I wanted to laugh so bad. I wanted so bad to laugh at him and say, "No, you didn't. Another man bought that for me. You didn't buy me shit." I couldn't say that because it would fuck everything all up that was being put into place. But inside, my mom was there, and I remember my mom looking over, like looking like, and I know she probably had the same thought, like, "No, you didn't." But again, inside I felt good because I had something on him. After all the shit that I had been through, it was like, I have something on you that If you only fucking knew, I got you. That's the way I felt. Like, I got you. If you only fucking knew. And, but, I'm not going to say that, I didn't get upset with what he said. I just, okay, that's fine. Like, I didn't say nothing. I wasn't going to talk back to my father. But inside, I was laughing and I was happy that I finally, because I knew the truth. So then some time goes by, a couple weeks or whatever, and they get into it again. And it was bad this time. It was really bad this time. And we left. Me, my mom, my brother, my sister, we left. My dad wasn't there. He had took off. He got into it. He took off. And then me, my mom, my brother, sister, we took off walking. He's like, come on, let's go. We're leaving now. We're going to get out of here now. It wasn't what was planned. It was just, shit got bad that day. And she's like, come on, he's not here. Let's get the fuck out of this house. So we took off walking. We had no bag. We had nothing. Just boom. We took off walking. We walked down to Easy Liquor right there in the corner. Easy Street in Willow. I don't know if it's still there, but right there on Easy Street in Willow, there was a liquor store called Easy Liquor. And we walked over there, walked through the alley, and my mom gets on the fucking payphone. She's calling my grandmother or my aunt. One of the other. I think I'm going to call my grandmother, tell my grandmother to come get us. To hurry up and come get us before he came back. So we changed up the phone and boom, the little Volvo pulls up right next to us. We're standing by the phone booth and boom, he pulls up. Like, get the fuck in the car. All you guys get in the car. So I'm like, damn, we're not going to get out of here. So we all get in the car. We leave, go back to the house. They get into it again. And we're all just, me and my brother and my sister, we're all just sitting there scared, and mom's going through what she's going through, and but this time my mom was like, nah, she's really gonna leave, I think it was the next day. My dad was at work, and the way our house was set up is, it was kind of really long, a long home. You got the living room, the restroom, my bedroom's over here, and there was another another room behind, on the other, past the bathroom. You had to walk through that bedroom to get into another bedroom. That was my parents' bedroom, way in the back, and there was a door that went into the backyard, and there was two garages, one to the right and one in front of you. And right in front of you, when you walked out that door, there's another garage right there, and there was an alley behind the garage. So my mom tells me, Gilbert's here. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah, Gilbert's here. I said, where? She's like, he's in the alley. And I'm like, what's he doing over here? What's going on? Well, I'm terrified. My dad wasn't no joke. You know what I mean? I was terrified. Like, what is this dude doing over here at the house? And she's like, help me get my stuff. When I put my stuff, he's going to take it, put it in the car. We're getting out of here. I told you we're getting out. I thought you wanted to leave. I said, I do. And she's like, okay, well, here's our chance. We're going to leave. I got to get some of my stuff out of here first, though. We're going to leave within the next couple days. And so I'm like, but why is he over here? And she's like, he came to get some of my stuff. So I'm like, fuck. All right. So she opens the back door, and next to the garage, there was a little gate that went to the backyard. I mean, to the alley. So the back gate opens up, and he's standing there. I can see his little white car right there. And he smiles at me, and I go and hold on. So I can see his little car right there, and he's at the gate, and we start. Me and my mom, and he's looking. And he says, "Hey, what's up? How you doing?" And I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking, "Are you fucking crazy? Like, what do you? This guy's got to be nuts. Like, you're over here at my house, and but we're passing him bags. And he put them in the car. And then my brother comes out. See, my brother doesn't know what's going on. My brother knows nothing. Neither did my sister. My sister was really young at the time. My sister's probably only like 4 years old. Because I was 13, and so my brother was 9. My sister was like 5, 4 or 5. So my brother didn't know nothing about this, and he leaves. He takes his stuff, closes the gate, boom, he takes off, and we go in the house. But my brother had came out and seen us giving this stuff to him, and matter of fact, when he came into the backyard, my brother was the first one to see him, I think. But anyways, when he left, my brother was like, "Hey, mom, isn't that the guy that works for Grandpa?" And my mom was like, "No, what are you talking about?" She was, "That was the guy that came into the backyard." My brother didn't see us passing bags and shit to him. My brother seen him in the backyard. My brother says, "Yeah, that guy that was in the backyard right now." My mom was like, "That was just a homeless guy in the alley." He's like, "No, no, no. I seen him before at Grandma's house. He works for Grandpa. I seen him before." And my mom's like, "No, he's not. That's a homeless guy. It was this homeless guy came into the backyard." He's like, "No, no, no, no." And my mom tells her brother, "Listen, shut your mouth. It was a homeless guy from the alley. Don't say that. Don't say that again." He's like, Ted said something about like, "Should we tell my dad there was a homeless guy?" She's like, "Don't tell your dad nothing. Don't say nothing to your dad at all. He's not in the backyard. He left. That's not nobody from Grandma's house. Don't say that. Don't ever say that no more. Just keep your mouth shut." So he's like, I know he was wondering why he was getting yelled at, but he's like, "Okay." And I remember telling my brother too, like, "Be quiet. Don't say that." But now again, here I am, terrified, like, fuck. Why is this guy here? Why did he come here to my house? You know, if my dad knew that, he's we're all gonna be in trouble. So I think it was the next day when my mom left for the first time. I mean, for the final time she left. And that's when me and my brother ended up staying there because he wouldn't let me and my brother go because I guess he thought that my mother would come back and me and my brother didn't leave if he didn't allow us to leave. But things didn't turn out that way. This time she was for real about leaving. So that was that, she left. Now as far as, Gilbert went, once I moved into my aunt's house in Inglewood, in Lawndale, when we left my dad's house, me and my brother, we left my dad's house and he dropped us off at my aunt's house. It was probably a month later. That's when I really started to get to know Gilbert because I really didn't know the guy. I had only seen him those 3 different times. The time in my grandma's alley, the time that he gave me the Nintendo, and the time that he came to my house. But those 3 interactions weren't like, like we sat down and talked. I didn't really know nothing about this guy. Come to find out after the fact, after all this shit had happened, we went to my aunt's house. Then I started to find out what was going on. And it turned out that because when my dad was when we were with my dad after my mom left, my dad would go out looking for my mother, but he couldn't find her. And I remember he'd come home and tell us like he couldn't find her. He doesn't know where she's at. And in order for to even talk to her, he'd have to go through my aunt or my grandmother. He'd have to call them, and then they would call my mom, and they didn't even know where she was at. That's how how much she was hiding. That they didn't even know exactly where she was at because she was afraid that he would find out. So they'd have to call her, and then they would have to call around to get a hold of her, and then she'd call them back, and then that's how they would communicate. Um, then once I went to my aunt's house, and my brother went with my mother and my sister with Gilbert to a little trailer park in Hawthorne, is when I started to find out the story of what was going on. And that's how I found out that he was around when my father was in prison. And that he was, he wanted to play the father role to me, thinking that my father was never going to come home. And he would tell my mom that he would, take care of me and all this shit like that. He was, I guess, dating my mother. And that he would take care of me and all that stuff like that. Well, the problem was, he wasn't just some random guy. He was my father's brother-in-law's brother. Okay, so my aunt, my dad's sister, was married to my Theo Richard. That was Richard's brother. So I think that my father, because of pride and all that, my father fucking hated this guy. I don't know how he feels about him now to this day. I mean, it's been so many years. I didn't even know if the guy's still alive. But my father hated him with a passion. I remember when one time I was already living in Fresno. Well, before all that is when I started to get to know him. Once I went to my aunt's house in Lawndale, I would go around them. My mom would come sometimes pick me up with him. And he was a nice guy. He was a really nice guy. He would treat me like if I was his kid. You know what I mean? It wasn't like he was treating my brother or sister bad, but he treated me like I was his kid. He gave me money. You know what I mean? He came around at a time in my life where, things were fucked up for me as a kid. So, of course, I took to that. Here's somebody that's, he wanted to be like a father figure toward me because me and my father didn't get along. I hated my father. You know what I mean? We had our feelings toward one another. And here comes this guy along, and he wants to be that kind of father figure toward me. You know what I mean? So, he give me $10 here, $20 there, always checking up on me and shit. Even though I wasn't living with them, he'd come check up over my aunt's house, or he'd go to when I left my aunt's house and went to Inglewood to my grandmother's house. He'd come over there, see if everything's all right. If I need anything, give me some clothes, give me a little bit of cash. You know what I mean? Like you're okay. You need anything? He was always stealing shit because he was a bobtail truck driver. And he would steal shit out of the trucks when he was doing deliveries. He would open boxes and steal shit. So if he stole some Walkmans or something, he'd always kick me down. He would steal them because he had a drug problem. He was a heroin addict. But, he would steal shit so he can boost it and, make some money. But whatever he stole, he would always save me something and give it to me. So I would have little things here and there because he was giving me shit. And so, of course, I took to that. Of course, I became close with the guy. Again, he didn't treat my brother and sister badly. He treated them very well. But me, it was something different. And so I started to really get to know him and shit. You know what I mean? Like I said, I found out the story. I found out he was my uncle's brother. And my father hated the guy. And the guy was terrified of my father. Like, I don't know what possessed him. I mean, he must have really been in love with my mother to be willing to know that if my father and my family members ever fucking caught him, ever laid hands on him, were able to get him, he wasn't going to exist anymore. My cousins, everybody. And on my dad's side of the family, not my mother's side of the family. My mother's side of the family didn't give a shit, but my dad's side of the family, my cousins, my dad's homeboys, all that. If they ever were to catch him, he would not exist. You know what I mean? So fast forward a little bit, I moved to Fresno with my aunt. I leave at Inglewood and I go to Fresno with my aunt. And my mom and them decided a few months later that they're going to go to Fresno because it's too hot down in Southern California for them. You know what I mean? Because before, I think my father was looking for my mother because he wanted his family back. But now it's a different thing. I don't think that he was looking for them because he wanted my mother back. I mean, he was angry. And I think, and I can understand it. I can understand it because it's like you made me look, even though all this shit is my dad's fault, as a man, you still have that pride and you're still like, you motherfuckers made me look bad to everybody. And it's like, fuck both of you. You know what I mean? I think that was what's in my father's head. Like, fuck both of you guys. You know what I mean? You guys made me look bad to everybody. Even though, like I said, this whole thing was my dad's fault. It wasn't my mother's fault. It wasn't Gilbert's fault. It wasn't my fault. This whole thing was my father's fault because the way that he was. But he was young, hot-headed, and he was going to do away with that dude any way he could. So I was, like I said, I was in Fresno already. My mom and them decided months later that they were going to leave because it was too hot out there. They got tired of hiding. They got tired of not being able to go nowhere without running into my father. And then something bad's going to happen. Or my family members. So they got a U-Haul and they packed their shit up. Then they were at my grandmother's house in Inglewood with all the stuff packed up. I think they might have been over there just to say their goodbyes to my whatever they were doing. I think they're saying goodbye to my grandmother and all that shit. And who pulls up? My dad and my cousin. Obviously, my dad's out there looking for them because there would be no reason for my dad to be at my grandmother's house because I wasn't living there no more. And me and my dad weren't even talking. But he showed up. From what I can remember, somebody called him and told him that my mother and Gilbert were there. That's what I remember the story being. That somebody called him and said, they're there at Rosemary's house in Inglewood right now. So boom, my dad and my cousin pull up in that little Volvo. And again, I'm not there, but I know what's going on. I know what happened. I know the story. Gilbert sees my dad. My mom is in the house. Gilbert sees my dad. He jumps in the fucking U-Haul and boom, he takes off. And my dad and my cousin jump in the Volvo and they're chasing him. My grandma used to live off Inglewood Avenue. Off a Century in the 405. That was the exit you get off of. Or you can get off of Manchester, whatever. But Manchester or Century, didn't matter. Off the 405 right there in Inglewood. My dad and my cousin chased them all the way past Magic Mountain. High speed chase. This dude is swerving in and out of traffic on the freeways on the 405. And they're right behind him. That's how bad my dad wanted to catch him. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the only reason why my dad stopped because he was running out of gas. He was going to run out of gas. But he chased him all the way from Inglewood over past Magic Mountain, which is a long fucking way. This dude was terrified of my father. As he should have been. Because, again, he wouldn't exist if my dad ever caught him at that time. And I think you know, my mom might have kind of lost some respect for him at that time because of that. But, this whole thing was just still fresh. She still needed to get out of there and to Fresno and all these things. So, but there had to be some kind of disappointment in her that this dude just smashed out on her, left her there, got in the U-Haul, he took off, terrified. And then they ended up moving to Fresno. And again, me and him always got along. Me and him always had a good relationship with one another. Before they moved to Fresno, before I even moved to Fresno, he saw this little white Toyota 4, I think it was a 4-door, Toyota Corolla. I was 13 years old. And I used to tell him, like, I call him, like, hey, Gilbert, can you give me a ride to my homeboy's house? And he was like, yeah, I'll take you. So he come pick me up and take me wherever I wanted to go, drop me off. And then finally one day he was just like, Dad, just take the car. And I'm like, fuck, I'm only 13. I knew how to drive, but I'm like, I'm only 13. Don't worry about it. Just go to your homeboy's house, go hang out, but don't be cruising around. Don't get caught. Just go ahead and go. But come back. Don't be gone all night long. Just, So I thought I was cool, you know what I mean? I'm running around 13 years old, this little 4-door Toyota Corolla with my homeboys in it. At first, it would start off, I'd go to my homeboy's house and hang out there and just be there all day, and then I'd get in the car and I'd come back home. But, after a couple times, you're like, fuck it, get in the car, let's go. And we go fun. I wouldn't gangbang, but I would go, different homeboys' houses, go to the park, go to different chicks' houses and shit like that, cruising around, listen to music. I remember I had a bunch of East Side Story tapes, and I just throw those in, and me and my homeboys would be in the car. We'd go to the mall. But again, I was only 13 years old. I was a little kid cruising around in this guy's car. But, I liked it. He, like, again, he treated me well, kicked me down with a little bit of money and stuff to eat. Became kind of close with him, like, not kind of, but I did become close to him because there was one time when my mom threw him out of the house. This was years later when we lived in Hawthorne. She threw him out. She told me she was tired of him. He was getting more and more into drugs again and shit. And she threw him out. And I told her, if he leaves, I'm leaving. Because without him, I thought, without him, what the fuck she gonna do? He's working. She ain't got no job. What the fuck, we can't afford to live. And we were living in an apartment. Like, what the fuck we gonna do? You're gonna throw this guy out. You can't afford anything. What are we gonna fucking do? He's not doing anything wrong. I said, in my mind, he wasn't doing anything wrong, because he took care of all of us. So she threw him out, and I said, if you're gonna throw him out, I'm leaving. And so she told him, get the fuck out. I said, I'm gone. So I took off and went to my homeboy's house. And me and him took off and wandered in the streets all night. But we ended up in Fresno. And then another time, we were living on Marks Avenue in Shaw in Fresno. Some apartments there. And anytime my dad would come up to visit my brother or sister, that guy disappeared. Because my dad would come up to Fresno sometimes to visit my brother and sister. Not to see me, but he'd come to see my brother and sister. But anytime that he knew my dad was coming up, he disappeared. He was gone the whole fucking day. He wouldn't be around. We wouldn't see him the whole day. He'd go hiding somewhere. I mean, he was definitely afraid of my father. And there's one time that we're living on Marks and Shaw, and my mom says, she told him, Big Mike's here. And he's like, what are you talking about? And she's like, I know he's here. For some reason, I know he's here. He's around here somewhere. And he's like, why would you say that? She's like, I don't fucking know, but I know that he's fucking around here somewhere. He's here. He's up here in Fresno. I know he's here. And he's like, just thinking that she's paranoid. She was standing by the window, looking out the window, because he didn't know where we lived at, what apartment complex we lived. He would go to my grandmother's apartment because he knew where my grandmother lived at. So he would go to her apartment to see my brother and sister. He didn't know where we lived at. My mom was looking out the window and she sees that little green station wagon go up the street really slow. Somebody had ratted us out, told my dad where we lived at. And he was cruising down the street really. I mean, he was looking for the guy. He would drive all the way to fucking Fresno. And he was cruising by really slow. My mom turned around and told him, he's outside. He's outside. And this dude jumped up, ran out the house, got in his little car and took off. Left my mom behind. Like, but I'm telling you, he was terrified. That's why I think my mom lost full respect for him. My mom told him shit, would talk shit to him like, you're a coward. You're a coward. You know that he was outside and you took off, left me here. You're scared. You're scared of him. You know, so my mom was like little by little losing respect for him because the things that he was doing was cowardice. He wouldn't stand up to my father. If he saw my father, he was running. You know, of course, a woman can't look at a man and be like, you know, respect that man if that man does shit like that, you know. To me, he just treated me good, so I really didn't think about all that. And then again, from there we ended back, that's when we ended up in Hawthorne. And I think by that time my father was already married to his wife. So I don't think he really gave a fuck anymore, you know. But I don't know how my father feels about that guy anymore. I don't know if my father has ill feelings toward him. I don't even know if the guy's like, because once my mother threw him out when we were living in Hawthorne, I can't remember ever seeing him again. I don't remember ever seeing him again. I don't know what happened to him. I don't. I could say, well, I appreciate him looking out for me. You know, taking care of me when I was a young teen, because I was from the time I was 13 to I think I was 15 is when he was around. From I was 13 to 15, those 2 years, you know, he looked out for me. He did look out for me. You know, he took care of me. He bought me clothes. You know, he gave me money. Never treated me in an ill manner. My brother or sister either. You know, he took care of the household. He did what he had to do. But I mean, to be honest, he was a coward. You know, he was a coward. He was afraid of my father. And I think my mother, I don't think my mother had plans on like staying with him. I think my mother, her plan was to get the fuck out of the house. And he was the way out. You know, he was willing to do whatever he had to do besides lay his fucking life on the line. He was willing to do it for my mother, whatever he had to do to be with my mother. And I think my mother seen that. So, but I don't think my mother had, I don't know. This is me speculating. I don't think that she had any intentions on like starting a whole fucking new marriage and all that shit with him. He was the way out. And, but again, I don't know whatever happened to him. So again, I appreciate what he did as far as helping us and for him looking out for me when I was a kid. After that, I don't know what happened to him. I wonder sometimes. I wonder whatever happened to him. I mean, because shit, I mean, this is 88 when I first met him, and he had to be in his 40s already. I don't know. He looked like an old man. Not like a geriatric old man, but he looked like an older dude. You're talking about 88. My mom was only in her 20s. No. Almost in her early 30s. I think. Yeah, my mom was in her 30s. So yeah, he was probably like 40, 40 years old maybe at the time. 88. So to almost 30 years ago. Um, Over 30 years ago. Pushing almost 40. But just say like 35 years. Guy's got to be in his fucking mid 70s right now if he's still alive. But like I said, I don't know if my father still has like that kind of feeling toward him. Like if he ever saw him, like he'd wanna. I don't think my dad would fucking beat him up or nothing like that. Not nowadays. But I think my dad would probably say something to him. Um, but I don't see any reason for that anyway. It happened so long ago. Um, it's just another chapter of my life and my father's life and my mother's life. It's just something we all had to go through. Um, it was fucking. I tell you, it was a hell of a fucking adventure, though. You know what I mean? It was some funny times. It was kind of some funny times. Like especially when I think about it now, it was like the dude was like the fucking roadrunner. My dad was a coyote. My dad just couldn't catch him. But every time he saw him, he was gone. Like I think his life would flash before his eyes every time he see my father or he heard my father was coming. You know, his life would flash before his eyes, and he'd book it real quick, and he would leave my mother behind every time. He wouldn't. Come on, let's go. Let's get the fuck out. Nope. He's off on his own. And like I said, my mother. I know my mother lost respect for him because I remember my mother telling him that, like, you're a fucking coward. You're gonna sit here and leave me behind. You're not gonna take me. You're just thinking about yourself, and you're gone. And so she finally ended up, leaving him after a couple years. And again, I never saw him again. But I do wonder whatever happened to him. I don't know if he's dead or alive. I don't ask nobody. I mean, I know. One of his nieces. She's on Facebook. I know her. I've known her for my whole life. But she's on Facebook. I've never asked her. I never asked her, like, hey, where's your uncle? How's your uncle doing? He's still alive. I never ask. It's not that I don't give a fuck. I just don't. I don't care. It doesn't affect me. But I sometimes do wonder, like, hey, what happened to that guy? Or is he dead now? Or is he back in prison? Because I think that was the last thing I had heard, but that was years ago that he ended up back in prison again. Because I think he was gone in prison for a lot of years when I was younger. I don't know if he was gone the whole 12 years, 10 years, whatever it was that I didn't see him. From the time I saw him when I was 12. I guess the last time I had saw him, I was like 1 years old, and then I saw him when I was 12. So I don't know if all the years he was in prison, but I remember him saying that he had been gone for a long time. Um, but then I heard like some years after that he had went back to prison. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know whatever happened to the guy. Um, I mean, if he's still alive, I hope he's doing well. Um, and again, I hope that my father doesn't still hold those bad feelings because I mean, shit, it kind of was your fault. You know what I mean? It was your fault why all that shit had happened. You know what I mean? So can't be mad at somebody else, for the things that you do. That's how I see things. I can't be mad at somebody else for the shit that I do. You know what I mean? These were my faults, so this is the outcome of that. But yeah, anyways, that's what happened with Gilbert and and how I met him and a little glimpse into him helping me and my mother get out of a situation. Um, but anyways, Thank you for watching the videos. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll be talking to you later.